you have announced a deal with an entity called Movimento, which delivers wirelessly apps to the connected car. And tell us a little bit about the security issue that you're addressing there.
Well, I guess maybe just to comment briefly on the changes that are happening in the car business, because that's a business that's just being fundamentally changed in a number of ways.
Yeah.
One of them, of course, and this one gets a lot of press, is the tendency that we're seeing of cars to eventually become self-driving in some circumstances, maybe in all circumstances someday. And that's clearly a major change. Now, another major change that's perhaps less visible, but even more important in my view, is that a car is very quickly becoming a software system. And a lot of the value in the car is delivered via the software. And the car is also becoming a connected device in the same way that an over-the-top environment or a consumer set-top box has been connected for a long time. Now, that leads to a number of new opportunities, but also a number of threats. And so what we're doing with Movimento, who's a leading provider of the sort of over-the-air software update framework that allows the software in a connected car to be updated, is using our security technologies to make sure that that vital software in the car is protected against hacking or external tampering. And by doing that, that whole new set of value in the car is protected against any external hacking attempts.
This is just the beginning of what is out there to do, right? I mean, anything that's operating in a software environment that's connected in the car becomes a security risk. And
absolutely.
And so this is just the beginning of the protection that has to get out there. Are you working with different entities and different manufacturers? I mean, how are you approaching this? Because everybody's got a different system operating in their cars. General Motors has one thing, Ford has another, and yet they're all vulnerable as things stand right now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done across the OEMs and also across companies like Movimento, who are the technology partners to the OEMs. And we're just starting in this area. We're just scratching the surface. But what's really clear is that there's a lot of important work to be done in the car area, and generalizing that as everything moves towards a much more connected Internet of Things. You've got your television environment, your cars, your payment environment, your computing environment. All of those things are going to be pervasively connected, and all of them are going to be delivering value via software. And so our role in that ecosystem is protect all those different instances of software and make sure that their value gets delivered.
And that gets us back to what's going on in terms of some of the things that you're doing that we haven't talked about in North America and worldwide. One is the Keys and Credentials Initiative, which has not been widely publicized, I guess, but it nonetheless seems to be a profound sea change in how people go about, namely people being distributors, pay TV operators, protecting content by outsourcing what has always been sort of the core thing that they do, that is making their content valuable and
absolutely,
and securing their relationships with their suppliers. So they are actually outsourcing this kind of thing. They must have a tremendous amount of trust in what you put together to be able to do that.
Well, I think the reason for the success of Keys and Credentials is essentially that we've come up with a way of providing the right level of security without locking in the customer. Because for a long time, having a robust security architecture meant being locked into a set of products from a vendor who also did other things. Now, the problem with that is that made everyone dependent on their vendors to make software changes and make updates whenever a new service was introduced. And now all of these companies, all of our customers, are competing at internet speed with internet companies. So we've essentially broken that coupling that made it necessary to have the suppliers do all these software upgrades for new services. And Keys and Credentials provides a very flexible security capability that, for example, is used in the next generation set-top boxes of most of the large cable operators now. And what that lets them do is to evolve their services at internet speed without each time coming back to a company like Irdeto to make software changes. And that's very powerful, and that's why it's being so widely adopted.
And so you are actually providing that kind of interface with the manufacturers that has always been their purview. Now you're doing for them that work of making sure those roots of trust are in the chips, and
absolutely,
and that's just got to be a tremendous undertaking from the standpoint of the cryptography, the storage, everything else that is in your facilities. Are you putting these in different places around the world now?
Yes, we support that capability from a facility in the US, also a facility in Europe, and they'll be more introduced in other parts of the world over time, I'm sure. And a lot of it comes down to just having the economies of scale of working with all of the major SoC vendors, all of the major set-top box suppliers. And while large customers could do all that work themselves if they wanted to, it's much easier for them to outsource that function to Irdeto because we've already got all those relationships and all those tie-ins to the production lines of all those companies that they need to partner with.
Just looking at the scope of what you're doing, it says to me that anybody that's trying to deal with security now can't think about specific apps, specific services. They've got to look at this holistically, and they've got to figure out a way to do it in a way that is going to take the burdens away from them, because otherwise they're going to be overwhelmed with it. It's just so many moving parts.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary, Fred. More than ever, it's an end-to-end game. It's not about securing pipes anymore. It's about securing the content from glass to glass, from end to end. And you have to have a level of capability across all of the different security systems out there. For example, we are an Apple FairPlay streaming partner. That means that we can do a FairPlay streaming implementation for one of our customers in that ecosystem. We also work with the whole Google and Android ecosystem, and with Microsoft, and with any other DRM that our customers want to employ, because the world is too expansive and too complicated now for one single system from a single supplier to meet all the needs. Mm-hmm. So we see ourselves as being at that hub of getting the best out of all these different security systems.
Well, it's sure going to be interesting to stay tuned and see how this evolves, but clearly it's moved into a new phase.
It will for sure. It's only day one at CES, and there's lots of interesting announcements already, so we're looking forward to more of the same.
Okay, Doug, thanks so much.
Thank you, Fred.